Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Gerontological Society of America's Career Conversations, using social media to share research, strategies, tips, and techniques. I am Dr. Juanita Bacsu, a Canada Research Chair in Nursing and Population Health at Thompson Rivers University. Before we begin today's program, I would like to provide a few logistical considerations. Please keep your audio on mute during this event and submit your questions for the panelists through the Zoom chat. We invite you to view the event in Zoom speaker mode. This career conversation is being recorded and will be available after the event on the GSA website. Now I am joined today by GSA members Dr. Patty Slatum and Dr. Sarah Dyes. Patty, Sarah, and I are members of the GSA Career Conversations Workgroup that plans the career conversations and mentoring consultancies. GSA's Career Conversations provides a forum for an exchange of ideas about issues and strategies to build a successful career in gerontology.
Thanks, Juanita. And you ever wondered how to communicate your research using social media? If so, our career conversation today on using social media to share research is for you. During this session, our diverse group of panelists will provide their tips, strategies, and insights to promote research on social media. And we encourage questions from the audience, so feel free to share those questions in the chat.
So in opening of today's career conversation, I'd like to introduce our panelists. We are delighted to have a distinguished group of gerontologists with us to share their perspectives on social media. First, we welcome Dr. Alexander Smith, professor in the Division of Geriatrics at the School of Medicine at University of California, San Francisco. Next, we welcome Dr. Fayron Epps, associate professor at the Nell Hodgson Woodruff School of Nursing at Emory University. And we are also pleased to have joining us Dr. Louise Aronson, professor in the Division of Geriatrics at the University of California, San Francisco.
Thanks, Sarah. Now, each of our panelists have diverse backgrounds and expertise with social media. And so we really look forward to learning and hearing from each of you in our conversation today. Sarah, kick us off.
Excellent. So our first question for the group is, drawing on your past experiences, what advice can you share for using social media to help disseminate your research? Dr. Epps, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Thank you, Sarah, for that question. And I think for my past experiences, and I will say, I've been using social media to disseminate my research and the work that I do maybe since 2017. So when I actually really took it serious and say, you know what, this is a new way. And one of the things I think we have to think about is, who will be our target audience? Who do we want to reach? This is something that you have to think about up front. And so when I started doing this, I had no training. No one talked to me about it. I just was like, me and my students said, we're going to try it. And so I didn't have the audience in mind. So it's just something for you to think about up front. Are you looking to reach, my work is with family caregivers and those living with dementia. Are you trying to reach them? Do you want to reach other, your peers, your colleagues? So those are things to think about. And then also what I learned is you have to have thick skin, because once you start disseminating your results on social media, you do not control where they go. They can be shared, they can be retweeted. And with that being said, you will get feedback, you will get comments, you will get direct messages about people's opinion about what you're posting and about your research. And I think, I wish someone would have told me in the beginning to be ready for that. And how to properly respond, if responding at all, because all comments that you get are, some of them, do not call for a response. But those are two things that I wish in the beginning someone would have instructed me on. And then I seen Dr. Aronson, you kind of chuckled a little bit.
I saw you see me. Yeah, I mean, I sort of agree, like and I think we all know this better now than we did in the teens when many of us started doing this, but you kind of assume this is me in my professional capacity and I'm aiming to do good in the world. And so when I would first get things, it'd be like, oh, this is a conversation. But sometimes it's really not a conversation, you know, it's somebody being snarky or taking something out of context and making all kinds of assumptions about you. And I would engage, and I just, you know, I mean, I think we all know better now. I still think there are other venues where that works well for me in conversations, you know, if it's an email as opposed to on social media. But I do feel like social media is a different animal in that way, and just not engaging is safer, but then amplifying the positive voices and seeing them as opportunities to meet new people and learn new things. You know, the example I'm thinking of is I posted something about the new, you know, hearing aids that people can, no, it was something, what was it? Oh, hearing disability in older age and the associated changes in cognition and everything else. And somebody sent me a tweet, this was on Twitter, back about, you know, the way you phrase that, people might think that everybody with hearing loss is going to have a cognitive disability. And I was like, oh God, you're so right. So sometimes people actually are making helpful comments, and that's really good in learning to be and do better.
Would you like me to jump? Should I jump in here? Yes, I've seen some nods. Okay, so I just want to riff on some of the things that Fayron and Louise just mentioned. So just to orient people who are on this webinar and who are listening in, I primarily tweet I primarily use Twitter. Well, I guess I use a lot of media. So I'm a co-host of Jerry Pal podcast, which we've had Louise on. Fayron, we need to get you on. So yes, good. All right, I'm glad you're in. Terrific. And so a lot of social media I do is to promote Jerry Pal. And the other thing I do is I'm executive editor at the American Journal of Geriatrics Society. And Eric Wadera does most of the tweeting for them. And then I help retweet what he tweets. So primarily I use Twitter, and primarily as far as my academic social media platform. And I use it primarily to promote Jerry Pal podcast and JAG stuff. Now I do like maybe 20% time tweet, original tweets of my own, but that's kind of diminished over time as those efforts have like sort of expanded, and you can only do so much, right? I wanted to respond to something that Fayron mentioned. Like, I typically don't respond either. Because sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. So let me just give you an example. I don't know if I share my screen, will it share, or is that a bad idea? Maybe. Okay, I'll try it.
Not sure.
Not sure. All right, we'll
I think
see
you
what
might have to
happens.
be co-host.
Share screen. Oh, look, looks like it'll work. Okay.
Oh, this is exciting.
All right, share. Okay, so here's our tweet about our latest episode on homelessness and aging with Margot Kuchel. And there were some, thank you to her tweets. And then there was a tweet that was talking about homeless persons as addicts. And I did not respond to that tweet. I liked some of the other tweets that were thankful. Oh, here, I gotta like that one. But this one, I just don't feel like I'm going to, have a productive conversation engaging with this person. So that's an example of choosing not to tweet. I'll stop there so we can, Louise.
Yeah, so I just wanted to piggyback because I actually use Eric and Alex as an example of this, and they amplify each other and have done from the beginning of all this social media really well. And to have a partner who, and Eric's more the clinician educator and Alex more the clinician researcher, and thinking like who in your world can help amplify, because especially if you do something cool, you don't necessarily want to be like, oh, I did this great thing, because then like, But your buddy could do it. And so they're a good example of doing that. And you can do it in small ways with lots of people, but maybe finding someone in another sector, like if you're working with caregivers, is there a caregiver person, and you kind of go back and forth. I think that's a great strategy to do it with without doing the ew.
And I think, and with that being said, I do think that's a great strategy. But if you partner with someone like that, we need to, who's following them? So who is their audience, right? So if the person you're trying to, sometimes I have posts and I'm trying to get it to one agency or one person, right? And so we have to be mindful. If I get someone else on my team to post it, I probably would have to come back and quote the tweet or reshare it if I'm on another platform, so it can also get to my intended audience. Alex mentioned something about how he has more than one account. So I wanted to talk about that. I have several accounts. And I have my professional Twitter account, which is me and the things I want to say. But then I have an account for my research lab. Then I also have an account for my community work I do with the churches. And I have all of these accounts on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And they're managed.
And you do your job too? Like how?
Yeah. Wait, hold on. This the thing. And they're managed by people. So that's the key thing, is to find trusted people on your team that can manage these accounts. But this helps me not mix up my messaging, because sometimes you can look at someone's feed and you're like, it's just all over the place. But I kind of want, if someone comes here, this is the information they're going to get. If they come to Alter, they're going to get things as it related to what they can do in their faith community and highlight some of the partners that we've done. So we created a plan. And yes, I do recommend this. If someone, just think about it, take your time to think about, what is my vision from the social media? What do I want to get out of it? And then come up with a plan. And we came up with a plan, how many times we want to put out tweets, what we want the messaging to be. On Mondays, it's always going to be about this. On Sundays, it's going to be self-care Sundays for one of my platforms. So those are the things that we've done on my team, and it has helped me a lot. And I just focus on my personal professional Twitter, and then my Facebook is more personal use. I only bring over my professional when I think it can benefit my following on Facebook. So remember, you always got to think about your followers and that message that you're going to send, because you want them to engage. So we just don't want to post stuff. You want people to engage with your post. So that means we have to have thought in the beginning and not just tweet, hey, good morning. And I'm not knocking anybody that does that, but if you want to kind of have some meaningful engagement and trying to get a message out there, I would do that. And I tell some people, they're like, I don't know about Twitter. And I have to tell you all, I have made meaningful connections through social media. And it's so powerful. I have received funding through those connections. So please, and I think Alex would say, don't knock it until you try it. Please do consider it.
Yeah, this is incredible, this conversation, even just, the funding aspect and networks, how we can augment our posts and our tweets by friends, having them reach out, and then having targeted accounts. Dr. Epps, like you mentioned, I feel like I'm learning so much here, just taking it all in. So to keep us moving along here, what have you learned about creating engaging content? Do you have some strategies that you use to kind of bring people in? I know you've kind of been touching on this a little bit on the side, but is there specific kind of techniques that you use?
I can go first here. A tweet, I'll start with Twitter, because that's kind of the dominant academic platform. The others are Well, it depends on who you're trying to reach, right? As Fayron said, like if you're trying to reach older adults who are caregivers for people with dementia, then you might have better luck on a different platform like Facebook, for example. But if you're trying to reach an academic audience, then Twitter is, probably where you're going to go. And there are studies that show that a tweet with an image has far more engagement than a tweet without an image. And for our podcasts, we have like you're not going to be able to do this if you're starting out, but we have a producer who we hire to like take the whole podcast, 50-minute video, and then create like a 1.5-minute little video that they push out on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and all these different platforms. So if you can add an image, that's huge, right? And if you're publishing a research study, I know a few people who do this well. James Deerdorf, who's a research fellow at UCSF, I'll put his link in the chat. He is so good at reading articles and then highlighting somehow the key points in the articles, and then posting an image of that, and then at the top, like a quick hitter about here's the link to the article and the main issue at hand. That's really good for promoting the sort of research he's found interesting. Other ways to do it, there are these visual abstracts that people create. Those are great. They take a lot of time to do well. So if you're short on time, the picture from the article, the key figure at JAGS, Journal of American Geriatric Society, we encourage, and we almost require, but can't quite require, but strongly encourage every article have a figure, a color figure that tells the main story of the article. And we use that to promote the article on Twitter. I'll hand it off to the others.
Well, I'll just interject here from a couple of questions that have come in from our participants today related to what you just said, Dr. Smith. One is, you mentioned at the beginning, finding where your audience is. So how do you go about finding them? Would it be to know which platform might be better? Is this just something you gain with experience of using them, or are there other strategies to recommend?
I can answer that quickly, and then I'll hand it off to the others.
Yeah.
We started out as a blog. Jerry Powell started off as a blog. And then we kind of like, everybody was blogging in like 2005 to 2010, it seemed like. And then the blogs kind of like sort of started to go away. And then people were like, well, you should try a podcast. So we put a microphone in the middle of our office and we recorded a podcast. I brought my guitar. It was a lot of fun. And we've been a podcast ever since. But will we be a podcast in 10 years? I don't know. Maybe we'll be doing TikTok videos. Maybe we'll have little short dancey segments. I don't know. We'll see. We're not about the medium. We're about the message. And so now, I talked to the med students. I was like, hey, I have a podcast. That's cool, right? I can connect with you. And they're like, are you on YouTube? And I was like, no. And they're like, oh, okay, you're not really all that. So now we have a YouTube channel. So you got to adapt to the times and figure out where your audience is, right? What medium are they using?
Yep.
And also you do a bunch of you're in different places now because different audiences are in those different places. Like you can still read it, you can still just listen to it, and you can watch it on YouTube.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And again, people will think, oh my God, that takes a lot of time, but there are systems out there, are applications that you can use. And I even think, is it Facebook that they've incorporated their own, if you wanted to set up when you want to post things beforehand. In the beginning, a lot of people was using Hootsuite. So I just want to let y'all know that there are things out there that will help you hit all the platforms at one time. So it's not you going to each one. And I love Jerry Talk. I have to see that. See Sarah put in Jerry Talk. I'm for that, Alex. We are actually having conversations because since I do a lot of my caregivers, they're on Facebook, a little bit on Twitter, but we're seeing what we did is I pay attention on TikTok. Who's on TikTok? And a lot of our caregivers are on TikTok. They're posting things about their situation and things like that. And so we're now trying to creatively think, how can we get on TikTok and share a serious message without, you know, some of the things that I do is it's really not funny, right? So it's not going to catch no one's attention through that avenue, but it's just trying to see how can we share this, because we know even younger individuals, we have youth, teenagers, people in college, they're caregivers now, and they're on TikTok. They are my kids. They get all the news. I was like, how y'all know everything that's going on in the world? TikTok. And so it's just like, whoa, you know. So again, it's just keeping up with the times and always doing like just what Alex did, is going to people and asking them, you know, just query them, you know, where do you get your information from? And again, it's all about meeting people where they are and not expecting them to always come to us. And that is something that I do for community engaged work, right? I go into the community and not expect them to come to the institution. So I think we can transfer that over into social media as well.
I do think there's an issue with social media and people who are, you know, depending on where they are and, you know, all sorts of things, over 70, certainly over 80. Are there people in these places in those age categories? Yes, but mostly not. So, you know, it's more people talking about those people. And then, you know, if you want to reach them, I don't know, maybe people disagree, but I generally find they're not on these media as much. There's more use of media since the pandemic. But still that I think is one of the weaknesses. And people say, oh, that's about age, but I actually think it's about generation. You know, if the first 70 years or 60 years of your life, this stuff didn't exist, you might think like, oh, I'm not going to bother. And so I think in particular in gerontology, we have this issue of we're reaching lots of people in these conversations, but maybe we're not reaching everybody in the target audience. And how do we do that better? You know, will it become easier as generations who are on these platforms age and become the older generations? I do think that's something we have to struggle with.
A lot of what I'm hearing, in addition to your creativity and time that you've put into building your brands, building these platforms, and continually working on them, that's not necessarily, you know, training that we get in the research field or you know, we're putting our time into making sure project deliverables are met, working in our research agendas. I loved what Fayron had to say about having, you know, a communication plan within the research team. So for those of us who may be new to this, may not have specific training, what are some social media resources or supports that you can share for folks who might be faculty members? We had a question in the chat about, you know, funding for professional video creation or image production. Can you speak to sort of these resources?
I think I can speak right quick about the funding. What I did is not like I have funding for social media, but in all of my grant applications, and I did an editorial about this, is I work with a creative partner, a branding or marketing company. I think that's really important. Us as researchers, we don't see ourselves as that. We don't think about that. But I do have a line item for marketing, because if they help with recruitment, but if it's to put these programs in the hands of those who need it the most, we need their help, because that's what they went to school for. And so a lot of my short video clips and things like that comes through that. So me having a line item for marketing, for branding, has helped me create some of those visual images and clips for my social media.
Yeah, I can't say I've used the word marketing, but I think, you know, they're often interested in scale and dissemination and impact and stuff like that. And we know for journal articles that the impact has gone way up with the use of social media. And that a lot of if it's just who read an article, your impact may be different. And I think one of the things we need to work on is how do you express the success or the reach of social media? I can remember years ago meeting with Alex's colleague, Eric, when Jerry Powell was already quite big, nothing like what it is now. And he had one item on his CV. And it was sort of the place where like the New York Times went for geriatrics content. And I'm like, no, this cannot be one line. So I think to the point, it's like, make it part of everything you do, right? So you make it something people recognize. Are you teaching about it? What are the views? What are the retweets? What are they? You can include those metrics and then definitely build it into your funding mechanism. Because the more we all are adding things on or doing things as extras, the less sustainable it becomes. So I sort of love the marketing idea.
Looks like there's a really great question right now on our chat board about how much do you average to spend on kind of the marketing and dissemination aspects?
So, and I have responded, this is where, again, let's not make this mistake that I did early on, is where it's an afterthought, right? I just plug a number in and like, okay, that's how much it should be. No, because these things cost. And so I think like moving forward, I always bring in the group that I work with in the beginning, even when I start writing a grant, to pitch my ideas to them. So then they help me like, okay, well, you can probably do this with this, do that. And then well, how much would that cost? And then they're able to give me that cost, because we don't want to shortchange them at the end, because if I only put $2,500, but what they're going to do for me may cost $5,000, then I'm missing something. So all they're going to do is be able to produce like half of what I really need. But if,
I just, that question, I think it was mine, but just for us that have never thought about it, this is a really great idea, and I really appreciate your thoughts and experiences. But just to give us a sense of how much, I know that is not to be accurate, but
yes,
just to give us an idea of how much it can be, because I have no idea of how things cost on that regard.
Sure. And so I have put in my budget $3,500 to $20,000. It depends on the grant that I have and what I'm trying to get out. And a lot of times I have to piece things together. So I will let you know $3,500 is not going to get you far. So I'm going to be upfront. And a lot of my colleagues, I just recommend for them to put at least a little bit over 10,000 if you're just trying to get started, because you have to think about they have a whole team and we have to pay for their time and their creative, I forgot what they call it. I'm learning all kinds of things working with them. But on the average, I would say maybe about 12,000 just to get you started, to have some great content. But if you just want one thing for them, then you can go less than $10,000. I'm not sure, Louise and Alex, if.
Well, for Jerry Powell, we spent about $25,000 on marketing over a 3-year period. And this is, most of you aren't going to have a podcast, so it's rather unique. But it might give you a ballpark idea of how much these things cost. Like, that paid for things like advertisements on different podcasting platforms that were just like, images, still images, like considered and boosted, promoted podcast. It also paid for a red endorsement on a very popular medical podcast that actually boosted us up way up in Apple Podcast rankings. Like, I think we were in the top 10 for a period of time on health podcasts, and that we started at like 120, went up to like top 10, and then dropped down to around 50, something like that. So it really did make a difference. It was certainly money well spent.
And for those who don't have money or are already in the middle of things, there's sort of similar strategies, or at least, things that you can do to amplify. Think about who's speaking to your target audiences. And in an ideal world, if you sort of amplify and raise up them, they are likely to do the same for you. And I think this is one of the ways social media works really well. Does everybody do this? Not necessarily. If somebody has like 100 million followers, they may just not notice you. But that is not usually the case in our world. I mean, if you're retweeting Beyonce, good luck to you. But generally, good behavior, it's a collegiality that really helps. And so it can make sense to really think about who you're following and who you're amplifying also. And I think when I started, I followed all kinds of people, and sometimes people that people told me to follow, and then I would get these things and I'd be like, why am I getting this? And so, as you modify what you do, think carefully about who you're paying attention to and who's starting to pay attention to you. And I do think good deeds come back and help with getting your message where you want it to go. And that's something you can just do on your own. I'm clearly less financially savvy as my colleagues on this.
I think something else that this conversation has raised for me, in addition to the funding, is the multi-level nature of your platforms, particularly within your research teams, right? So you're an individual that is using social media. You're also a research team that is sharing your work. And you're situated within a university that may or may not have policies around what you can or cannot share. Would you mind speaking to whether you have experience with working with university partners or within an institution, how you market yourselves in that way, given the multi-level nature of your sharing out?
So I don't know, because I was looking at some of those comments. I know I'm currently at Emory University, and we are active on social media. Like, we have a great team, community outreach team that's trying to reach all, because remember, they're trying to reach students as well. And so a lot of their messaging is geared toward trying to reach the students, making sure that they're engaged and they apply for the School of Nursing and things. And so they're looking to go to these different platforms, and they encourage us to use social media as well. So our associate dean, she retweets everything. And you got to be careful what you send her, because she may tweet it before you get it out there. So, but they are really, we have another part of our community outreach team. If we have visitors come, we're asking them to not just tweet, but post on their favorite social media platform and just use this hashtag. So that has been my experience where I'm currently employed.
I'm at UCSF, Louise and I are UCSF. The chair of the Department of Medicine is Bob Wachter, big into Twitter. He has like 300,000 followers or something like that. He had a blog when Eric Wadera and I were starting a blog. We said, hey, we're thinking about doing this. What do you think? He's like, oh, that's a great idea. You should absolutely do it. I get more invitations to speak from social media than anything I ever wrote, in prominent medical journals. Same thing within our division of geriatrics. Very supportive of our efforts to use social media to disseminate the message. But that's probably not true at all places. So you kind of got to figure out your local institution. And can't say, I don't think I've ever how have I gotten in trouble with social media? Well, okay, so I do at the American Geriatric Society, which is like next week. We for years did this literature updates, and I did these parody song sing-alongs at the end, and I did one about aducanumab, and it was like all over Twitter. And I'm also on this independent review committee called the Institute for ICER, and I'm on the California Technology Assessment Forum. We review not just the effectiveness of new drugs and medications, but also their costs to society. And I got an email from the head of the organization, Steve Pearson, saying, I saw this tweet of you singing super aducanumab is not that efficacious, and I don't know, you can be impartial. And so I was kind of kicked off the committee. And I was actually kicked off again because I warned him. You see that big pharma hat, for those of you who are on video, that is going to be me next week. That's a little preview. So I was actually kicked off the committee about lecanemab as well. But that was okay with that. That was a fine trade-off for me.
I too have gotten in trouble, although with UCSF, because when certain things come out and you call them on things, or during pandemic when people were being, ageist and or racist, and they will have a knee-jerk reaction defending the institution. So the institution will always come before you. So just, beware, and you have to decide, is it more important to you to stand up for what you believe is right, and even if you get into trouble? After one thing where I really thought it was on one of our local news stations, I definitely got in trouble, and I just took UCSF off my handle. Although if anybody looks, you'll see I haven't been on for a while because of this Elon Musk stuff. And I do think we're in an awkward period. If all of us got off, like now immigrants are going to be, they won't know which government agency to deal with. It's an issue. But most people are still on. So I'm personally divided, does anybody care? Not on, probably not that many people. But the bigwigs are still using it. So then you sort of feel like, is this hopeless and I'm just doing my career damage? Or do we, we almost need the platform to rally people off the platform. But I do think there are some big ethical questions right now about what to do. And I just felt like we couldn't go through this without mentioning that, even though, I miss it and it was great and I'm probably not making any difference.
Yeah, I would also say, so Eric and I often give talks to the fellows about using social media to promote your career. And our tune has changed over time. And the fellows who we're teaching has changed over time. 10 years ago, they were all like, oh, help me do this. I want to get on. How do I do this? And we're like, okay, first, you can't be an egghead. Like, you have to have a picture on Twitter. You can't just be an egg. And then, but now the fellows are like, I don't know, I'm really leery of social media. I try not to use it. I worry about so many things with social media, becoming addicted, the loss of self-esteem that happens to many people who are on social media, the negativity, the spread of disinformation, the fact that you're contributing content toward a platform that's owned by, one of the few oligarchs in technology, Elon Musk, et cetera. Do we really want to, is this a way that we should be spending our precious time? Though it seems like there are so many positive aspects. So it's a much more complicated message now. It's a much more, and I think that tension is the right place to be with social media now, and that sort of the moral conflict about what the right thing to do is. I'm not sure myself. I think the bubble was first burst for me in 2016 with all the spread of disinformation around the election. And then now with Elon Musk buying Twitter and just sabotaging it in so many ways, after we've spent, we've spent so many hours, hundreds, thousands, probably thousands of hours building up our presence on Twitter. And now, you got one maniac who buys it and then does crazy things with it. I don't know. I'm not sure what the right thing to do is.
Well, and I never did Facebook for similar reasons, but then Zuckerberg bought Instagram, which I really only use personally anyway. But, you could argue that Zuckerberg's actions to dissolve privacy and undermine democracy are what led to Elon Musk in this space. So it's definitely a moral conundrum, and yet you can really do your career so much of a service by being on and a disservice by not being on. And so what do we do?
And I think it's and you talk about do your career service versus disservice, but I think if we go back to also just consider, because I think about these things, but also think about how can I reach my caregivers? How can I get this information out to them? How I can give good information, give research, because they're not reading my journals. They're not reading those. I mean, we know that. There are not, very few are reading the articles that we publish in our academic journals. And I also have a newsletter, but I can see who opens up my newsletter when I go through MailChimp and things like that. So I'm using different avenues, and we used to print newsletters as well, but it's just that, right now we have such a greater reach by being on Facebook and this, because now people can put in someone else's name that they want them to come check out this message. So it's just something, it's something that you do. You have to think about, discuss it with your team if you're doing this as a team. And what makes sense.
And in that vein, what are some pieces of advice that you give for folks who are considering adding this to their strategic plans within their research team?
Is this our pearls of wisdom or no?
Not quite yet. This is
okay.
I'm coming back to kind of adding communications as part of your research plan. What pieces of advice would you extend to folks who may be considering doing that for the first time?
I think if you're building your lab or building your research team, to hire individuals that can help you in this area. So when we hire students and research staff, we always find out who's good at social media, who loves it. Because I don't want to have someone that no, I don't want to do this. But if someone really loves it and they're on it all the time, well, then we work with them and let them manage our communication plan, or we call it a social media plan, and take that over. So I just want to let you all know it all doesn't have to fall on your shoulders. If you have somebody within your lab or your team that really enjoys crafting messages, please let them do it. But train them first as it relates to what messaging you want to go out there. And so everybody on my team, we have an orientation and a training because words matter. And making sure that they're using the correct language, that they know who to retweet and who not to retweet. Who to so we kind of go through those things so they'll fully understand. And it's a learning curve. It is, because I've been called out during my learning curve where people will email, well, Dr. Epps, I thought you knew better than to use this. And I'm like, wait, we're learning. Let's give me a second, because I have somebody new on board. But people do pay attention. They really do. And so if you do decide to have somebody work with you, make sure that you all are on the same page on the messaging you want to get out, what words, who to retweet, who not to retweet, and things like that.
And I would say also that they know the difference between their personal account and what they're doing. So some people love being on social media, and it sort of behooves you to look at how and where they are on social media, and then to have an explicit conversation about this is a little different. It does allow you to be on social media at work, which some people love. But it needs to be different, and then do that training is so key. I feel like there was some other part of that question I was going to respond to, but now I can't remember what the question was.
I have a question. I know we only have a few minutes here left. So how do you go about just the podcast? I've always been completely infatuated with podcasts, and I saw Jerry Pell and it's just like, wow, this is amazing. I have to do a podcast. And so, I have the funding, I have the grant in place, I'm ready to open my podcast. What steps would you suggest for someone starting out with the podcast journey?
I would say just do it. Just start recording. Like, I wouldn't overthink it. You can buy a Blue Yeti on for about $100, which is a great microphone. It's a great starter microphone. And then, you kind of have to decide what kind of podcast you want to be, but you don't have to figure that out right away. You can start your podcast and then build audience and change and grow, as like we've changed quite a bit at Jerry Pal over time. But you don't have to overthink it. The second thing is, probably a good idea to listen to podcasts before you record a pod. I hadn't listened to any podcasts before I recorded a podcast. So Eric likes to make fun of me about. So I've since started listening to podcasts and have learned quite a bit. And then we've incorporated some of those lessons into our podcast. Another thing is just fine if you're thinking about doing it to talk to people, reach out to me, reach out to Eric, reach out to other people who have podcasts. They're always happy to share their knowledge and, learning experiences about podcasts. But at a minimum, like the baseline thing is just get a really good mic. And you can spend for $100, you can get a really good mic. I know some people who I've listened to some geriatrics, gerontology podcasts that were recorded on really bad mics, and it's great content, but you got to be able to hear it, and it's got to sound good. So that good mic is that's the necessary step. Everything else is kind of like what you make of it. Are you going to be a chatty podcast? Are you going to be highly structured? Are you going to be, so Jerry Pal's a chatty podcast, so we try not to plan it out too much. We have a topic, we have a song in advance, and then we just talk about it. That's what we do. But other podcasts are much more structured, as I'm sure you're aware.
Oh, very cool. That's so insightful. Great things to keep in mind. I guess similar question with the videos. You're talking about these 1-minute kind of video clips. How do you go about that? I think that's such an amazing idea to help get our research out to the public. So what's the first step there? How do you even get that started?
I can tell you all what we did. And Alex, they might have done it different, but we worked with our marketing team, and we picked a day, picked a location, invited a lot of people come in, and we just filmed. So maybe 8 hours of content in different areas. They did photo shoots. I am so sorry. They did photo shoots and everything. And then afterwards, they put it on Frameo. And then we go back and we sliced it. And my team then pointed out, oh, we like that, we like that, we like that. Then they came back and sliced it and did an intro and an ending for each. I kind of rushed through that because I had somebody coming in.
Yeah, Jerry Powell, our producer does it. So I don't know what he does. We kind of try to get everybody, if we have 3 guests on the podcast, we try to make sure that we feature each guest. And that's a change from how we used to do it, where he would sort of take the highest impact statement. But now we try and make sure that each guest gets on the video clip.
Oh, very cool. So you do that for each session. Lots to keep in mind. There's so many aspirations happening here, I'm sure, in everyone's mind. It's like, oh, I can do video clips, I can do a podcast, this is great. But I am cognizant of the time. And so to bring our session to a close today, we have asked each of our panelists to share a pearl of wisdom about using social media to share research. Dr. Aronson, would you like to kick us off?
Sure. I think it's really fun. It's creative, and it absolutely transformed my career. I know we've mentioned this, but the speaking opportunities, the amplification opportunities, the contacts with people that you wouldn't otherwise have known, the ability to see articles, you can't see everything, but if people who share your interests, tweet something or post something, there's a good chance you'll be interested. So, it changed my career, and, give it a try. It could change yours.
Very cool. Dr. Epps?
Yes, I just want to piggyback on what Louise said. Yes, it has transformed my career big time in more ways than one. Again, I do a lot of community work, and we do have community groups that are on social media, and they're able to see what I'm doing. And so it just has been really, really amazing. But formally, I just want to share with folks that I would love for us to erase the box. And so many times we're like, oh, when I was in school, we was told, oh, you can't do that. You got to do it this way. You got to do that. And I'm not saying get outside the box. I want us to erase it. Let's destroy their box. And I want everyone to channel in and be creative and do things that you have never done before. In order for our research to reach those who need it the most, we have to be intentional, make the effort, and last but not least, meet people where they are. And I'm hoping that kind of sums up what we went over this last hour.
For sure, definitely. Dr. Smith?
I think that in this day and age, social media isn't for everyone, and there are great reasons to be on social media, particularly if you're trying to reach an audience that's on social media, as Fayron just articulated. There are also great reasons to be concerned or to be reluctant or to avoid social media. And I think those are equally justifiable positions. And so you do you. That's what one of our fellows said when we were talking about social media. Like, there are many ways to contribute. You don't have to contribute through social media. There are many ways to recruit research participants. You don't have to recruit through social media. And it is a wonderful tool if you decide to use it. I just wanted to say one more thing about the importance to your academic career. When I was going from assistant to associate, I had to go before a panel of researchers. And I said to them, this was 10 years ago, I said to them, I have a blog and I have a Twitter account with 2,000 followers or something, and they looked at me like I had 3 heads. What the heck are we supposed to do with this? I understand and then I said, and this columnist at the New York Times, Paula Spann, reads our blog and she's asked us to she's interviewed us 3 or 4 times about articles that have come up, and they were like, oh, okay, I get that. That's something I can understand. That's a currency they can understand. So I agree that it certainly has helped boost my career, and I think that there's still promotions committees are still trying to figure out what the heck to do with this. What does it mean to have 10,000 followers versus 20,000, or to have a high impact tweet or, Facebook post? They don't really know what's it like. Are you an influencer? That should probably count for something because it goes to national reputation and the impact of your work. But how do they measure it? I think they're still trying to figure that out.
But I think it should go on your CV anyway, because when they get used to seeing it, they'll be more likely to figure it out. So I'm always saying to trainees or junior faculty, make it look like an animal they recognize and tick as many boxes as you can, but add these other things in so they get used to seeing them too, because culture change is just disappointingly slow. It's just a fact.
And as we close our conversation today, we just want to encourage everyone to connect with their university or institutions and take advantage of any existing resources on how to use social media to share your research or promote your lab. In the chat, there have been several links that have been shared with different tips on using social media. We'll also be sure to include them with the recording of this event on the GSA website.
Thanks, Sarah. So thank you, everyone. And please join me in thanking our panelists for sharing their time on social media. And thank you also to our work group members who planned this career conversation. And thanks to you, our participants, for your questions and comments. And a big shout out and thank you to Gina Schoen from the GSA for all of your behind the scenes coordination and making this event possible.
And lastly, we will be sending out an evaluation that will really be a chance for you to tell us other topics that you'd like to see future career conversations on. So please take a moment to check that out as well. And thank you all very much. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for inviting us. Take care.